Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fourmation podcast, episode 14. We're now on. And if you've watched the podcast before, you may notice something a little different. Yes, our usual host, George, is away this week. So we've got someone who has been on the channel before for our De Classica preview. Though even though it wasn't that long ago, it feels like such a long time ago with all the football that we've had during that time. It's Josh Goodman. Say hi, Josh.
Hello, everyone.
And we've also got, of course, Harry.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Harry. And Devon.
I'll not leave such a big pause like Harry did. Hello.
Obviously, we've got loads more to talk about this week with, obviously, the Premier League coming to an end. We will talk about, with it being episode 14, George was looking forward to mentioning Wes Hoolahan, who obviously donned the number 14 for his beloved Norwich City, who we will maybe get onto talking about a bit later, debating who out of the three relegated teams will do the best next season in the Championship. We will also talk about the FA Cup final and some transfer stories, news, rumours, whatever you want to call it. But before that, with all the football we've had, the Premier League has now come to an end finally, with what has been the longest football season by far. And with the Champions League races and the relegation battle being concluded, we also had the departure of David Silva, who played his final game for Manchester City. Roy Keane, who's not someone who offers out praise lightly, classed him amongst the Premier League greats. And to be fair, you can't argue with him. 93 assists, which only 5 players in Premier League history have done better. So, Josh, would you agree with Roy Keane that he's one of the Premier League greats?
Absolutely. I mean, he's made more than 300 appearances, and he's just an absolute sensational player, really. He's got outstanding technical ability, and it's just so hard to get the ball off him with his close touches, and his vision is just second to none, really. He's been instrumental in Manchester City's setup for years now.
Devon, what do you think made him so successful in the Premier League? Obviously, we hadn't really seen a player like him before he came in. Obviously, he's not the most gifted on the physical side, and a lot of people say that English football is more focused on the physical side rather than the technical side. So what do you think made him so successful in the Premier League?
I think he's kind of been the player at the end. Apologies. The embodiment of the change in style of football. Though the Premier League is quite aggressive at times, it's more passing based and build up now. And I think Manchester City have brought the Premier League into the modern era, and I think his elegance on the ball, and when he's running gliding through the centre, he's just he's rhythmic, and it's a joy to watch. And I think because of that change in the Premier League, it's really brought the best out of David Silva. And you've just got to look at some of his partners as well. You've got Yaya Toure, them two together were just electric, and that's probably pivotal to Manchester City's success, especially in them early years, because they needed to really prove why they'd spent the money and why they'd invested in heavily, and it's really paid off for him. The more exciting thing is now is who's going to be his replacement. But for the next few weeks, let's just reminisce about David Silva, because he is an exceptional player. He's just an absolute pleasure to watch, and I don't think, especially for his type of player, obviously you've got players with low centre of gravity and good on the ball, but David Silva's just on another level, in my opinion.
It's good that you mentioned Yaya Toure, because Jonathan Liu of The Guardian actually did an article comparing him and David Silva, and suggesting that potentially he's underappreciated for his time at Manchester City. Would you agree with that, Harry? Do you think Yaya Toure deserves a bit more appreciation from fans of the Premier League and Man City fans alike?
Oh, yeah, most certainly. You look at the season that he could have won Player of the Season. Only a Luis Suarez season where he had a phenomenal year, beaten to it. Yaya Toure won everything that could be won. He scored in cup finals. The only thing he didn't win was the Champions League. And Yaya Toure, I certainly think, was underappreciated. He could come back to the Premier League if he gets back-to-back promotions with Leyton Orient, but I do find it very unlikely. But both players, I think, they were the core of Manchester City's push up, and they've sort of, like Devon said, I think they have changed Premier League football possibly forever.
The question is now who replaces him. Obviously, we've got Phil Foden, who's coming to the side a bit more this season. We also have Ferran Torres, who's been linked quite heavily with Manchester City. The Guardian reporting that a £24.5 million deal has been agreed for Valencia's youngest ever goal scorer in the Champions League and the youngest player ever to reach 50 La Liga appearances. So what are your guys' opinions on this? Who do you think should be the man to replace David Silva?
Obviously, I've got to bring you back to Sheffield Wednesday. Fernando Forest now. I think the Torres link is merely because, a playmaker, Valencia, going to Manchester City, but it does seem quite a perfect fit. Just, I think he's a little bit more rash than David Silva. We know that David Silva likes to take a couple of, extra touches and spread the play, and even when he doesn't want to take that many touches, he's incredible in tight positions, threading the ball through. Whereas I think Torres is a little bit, from what I've seen anyway, is a little bit more driven. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for City to replace him. I think the constant links are going to be, the likes of Maddison, who's less well, not as good as David Silva. But again, it's the English link and the link-up play that could be there. I think the main talking point and personnel that's been mentioned is Phil Foden. Because, again, he does seem quite a like-for-like replacement, but I'd sense him more in the role of Kevin De Bruyne when he leaves, maybe. A little bit deeper, but can, really make them late runs into the box. It's kind of a little bit of mix of two, just not on that level yet. In terms of anybody else, you can't really see it for the, age. I think players like David Silva coming to fruition when they're like 24 and onwards, where some of the younger players, they seem to, I don't think they'll get that chance straight away at Manchester City.
Yeah. Do you think maybe then it's a bit too early for Phil Foden to become a regular star in this Manchester City team, Josh?
I don't think it is, personally. You look at back end of last season when he wasn't getting as much game time as he's had recently, and it just, you could see there was a spark, but there just wasn't any end product.
Yeah.
And he's had a fair chance this season, and he's been in the team quite a lot, and he's come on leaps and bounds from what he was, and he's still a young lad. He's got years ahead of him. I think he could well and truly get on David Silva's level, maybe even exceed it. He's a fantastic player, and he's starting to score as well, so that can only do him good.
And Harry, do you have any other suggestions to fill in that vacant spot in the Manchester City side?
So I would say James Maddison, but he's obviously going to sign a new contract with Leicester. I've got to agree with Josh. I was going to say it's an unpopular opinion, but I think he could exceed David Silva. You saw at the back end of last season, he got an important goal against Tottenham. He did well there. This season, when he came off the bench, he's got an important goal almost every single game against Arsenal, against Watford. Yes, they did batter them. They would have won anyway. But we were lucky enough to see him against Austria, and he ran the show. I know it was against a Kevin Danso's Austria, but he was phenomenal that day. In the cup final against Aston Villa, he's phenomenal. I think he's a phenomenal talent that should get a lot of minutes next season. If not, he's got to go somewhere because he deserves to get Premier League minutes on a regular basis.
Yeah, he is 20 years of age now, so you could argue he's at that perfect age to make that next step. Kevin De Bruyne has been name dropped by Devon already. He obviously got his 20th assist of his 20th assist of the season against Norwich, which levelled Thierry Henry's record from the 02-03 season. He was adamant that he had 2 perfectly fine assists taken off him, which he's got an argument for, definitely. He's obviously matched the feat that he did in the Bundesliga with Wolfsburg, 20 assists there, and making him the first player to ever do that. So is he another City Premier League legend in the making, guys?
He already is. He already is.
Definitely.
He's just so huge for him. That, I don't think they'd be anywhere near as good as they are with anyone else. Even I'd push the boat out and say he's the best Premier League midfielder in my lifetime. Easily.
I think David Silva's got to be mine. If we're, even though we're quite Manchester City heavy this season at the minute, but you've just got to look at just to move the focus back into Kevin De Bruyne, you just got to look at the way he plays. That link up between him and Silva has been immense, and probably the reason why they got the Centurions last season and this season. Even though Liverpool have took the headlines, I think Manchester City still have been quite good, even with the 9 defeats that Pep Guardiola's mustered this season. You can
well, still scored over 100 goals this season.
Yeah, that's the epitome of
just 100 odd.
Yeah, but that's the epitome of Manchester City, isn't it? They are relentless, and when you've got players like De Bruyne, they are always going to create chances. And in terms of like key passes, he has 3.9 key passes per game, which is more than somebody the aforementioned James Maddison, who we've already spoke a little bit about, and he has 0.57 assists per game, which is just immense in terms of numbers. And even when you look at some of the crucial games, when you play the likes of Manchester United, Chelsea, and Liverpool, I think that even though City have lost a couple of them games, I think De Bruyne has always been on the lips of everyone talking about Manchester City, especially in that 3-1 defeat to Liverpool. He was still orchestrating play when City had the ball and looked quite demoralised that they'd already been 3-0 down. They were still trying to create stuff through De Bruyne. And at 20, I think he's 29 now, and he'll probably have, I'd say we've got probably 3 good seasons at his peak still.
Yeah.
And then when this podcast is still going strong, we can talk about who his replacement is, which will definitely be Alex Hunt of Sheffield Wednesday, or James Ward-Prowse maybe, but.
No, he's never leaving. Never leaving.
Other than that, I think the main question is, should he have been Premier League Player of the Season?
I think so. Just based on the stats, I know that it's with the right board. It's more based on the story, and obviously Jordan Henderson got it for the rise that he's had as Liverpool captain. But I think he fills 3 spots of like the top 8 for most assists in one season. So that just shows, how consistent he's been, and he's even topped it this season. So I'd have to agree he's well on his way, if not already, a Premier League and City legend. Obviously, Devon already touched on it, but do you see his long-term future at Manchester City, Harry?
Yeah, I think I do. I think if they're in the Champions League, which they will be because the ban's been overturned, I think they are battling for that Champions League. Their squad size is immense. And, if they beat Real Madrid, they could go on to the final and win the Champions League once again. He could get into any midfield. But the important thing is that not a lot of teams can pay the wages that Manchester City can as well. So they do everything for him. And if he wants to stay, he can sign a lifetime contract because he will get into that team at no matter what. Because Devon said he's got 3 years left of his peak. But even 3 years after that, he's probably still better than any midfielder.
Yeah, you're probably right there. We'll
touching on what Harry said just quickly about the wages and other clubs not being able to afford it. I can't feasibly see any club that can sustainably pay for him in the first place and then have the money to continue with his wages, because I don't know what he's going to be valued at, but it's going to be something big.
It's got to be. I think when we started the podcast, I think it's episode 2, there was a crazy link with, obviously, the Champions League ban was the main driving force in the link, but De Bruyne was being linked away from Manchester City, and I think all of us said how we can't believe that Manchester City might even, if they are considering it, why? Because he's their best midfielder at the minute. Why would they want to even give interest to these links? But I think as soon as the ban got upheld, they've quickly scattered. And then in that podcast as well, we mentioned that it'd be succeeding 100 million based on other transfer fees. You look at Coutinho, 80 million. And a lot of other midfielders that are going beyond that. João Felix, even though he's very young, he's 120, and I think they're going to be round that mark for De Bruyne.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to prime away from City with the financial shackles being lifted on them,
I
lifted
can't
off
see.
them with the.
I
Go on.
can't see them letting him go ever. Really,
Yeah.
not until he's well beyond his peak, because they simply will not find another Kevin De Bruyne.
Do you think that he'll surpass David Silva then as Manchester City's greatest player in the Premier League?
Remains to be seen, but I believe he will.
Just depends if Sean Goat is getting rid of his title as Manchester City's greatest player.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to the. We'll blow past that and move on to the relegation.
I'm sure I saw
battle.
one of them dust balls come straight across the screen then.
We'll move on to the relegation battle that was obviously concluded on the final day, with Bournemouth and Watford joining George's Norwich City in the Championship next season. Bournemouth did all they could on the final day, obviously beating Everton 3-1, but it was too little too late for them. They obviously made a promising start to the season. They only lost 3 of their first 11, but it's just been downhill from there. 19 defeats in the last 25 has seen them plummet back into the Championship. And obviously Watford as well, who needed a positive result to stay up as well, being level on points with Villa, but they didn't get it despite a second half fight back against Arsenal. So the question is, which of the 3 relegation sides we think will fare best in the Championship next season? I'll go to Devon first.
I won't go to me first. I think I've been distracted by that car alarm that's been going off. Apologies if it got picked
Okay,
up.
we'll go to Harry first.
We'll go to me. Right.
Okay.
I think the 3 teams are probably better suited than any in recent history. Because I look at last season's teams that went down: Cardiff, Fulham, Huddersfield. They don't have the sellable assets that the 3 teams that got relegated this season do. I'm looking down at their squads. All of them have at least £100 million worth of talent. So if they're willing to reinvest, all of them can push for that player. So will Norwich? I'm not too sure, because they've never done that before. But they've also not had the squad before. Because I looked at the last time they got relegated, and they had players like, Nathan Redmond, what a player, by the way. It was their biggest asset. Mbakani, Matt Jarvis, Whittaker. They aren't the same level. But for me, Gary Hooper. But I'd probably say Bournemouth, because they aren't a team that's scared to invest. They're going to lose a lot of big players this summer. So they're going to have to reinvest if they don't want to become a bottom half Championship side. And I think they will, because their board aren't scared. We've seen from Watford's board, from sacking their staff, that they're not scared either. But for me, it's got to be Bournemouth that are going to be right up there.
Will they reinvest in their manager though, Eddie Howe? Do you see him staying?
If there's no other options for him, I think he might do. Because with the different squads, they might be reinvigorated. You never know.
Go on, Devon.
I was going to say, I hope George is not watching the full episode whilst he's on the barge, because he'll be crashing boats soon, won't he? Hearing that coming from Harry.
Sorry, George.
To be fair to Norwich, though, having their fate obviously sealed a bit earlier, it's kind of helped them in the way, because they've been busy in the transfer market already.
Yeah.
So do you think that will help them?
Yeah, they've certainly added quite a few players in. I think they're a bit top heavy in terms of midfielders. I think that's more due to the impending departures of Buendia and Cantwell. But if you look at that, they're probably going to get at least 40 million, maybe even 60 for both. For each of them players combined. And if they could invest that, when I was speaking to George, as I mentioned that they probably need to add a centre half to the side, and also a more potent striker, because I think Pukki towards the end of the season looked very sluggish. He looked not overweight as such, but he just didn't look interested, and the runs that he were making at the start of the season just disappeared. So maybe they could be looking at getting a 20-goal season striker, someone like Dwight Gale, and if they get the money and they can recuperate it into that deal, they won't be as less inclined to spend a lot on Dwight Gale, because just because of his renowned ability to score in the Championship, maybe not in the Premier League. And then they could look at maybe a loan signing, because I don't think Adam Ida's one, probably ready yet, and 2, I don't think Daniel Farke trusts him. As we've seen, he gets brought on with 4 minutes to go, which is not going to really make a big impact there. Other than that, I think Norwich Norwich have a decent side. I think the core of that side as well, Vranic, and his name escapes me, but their side in the Championship kind of just went up with them, and they added a couple of players, so that kind of core is still there, and the nucleus is still there. And I think they'll keep hold of that. I think they'll just lose, one of the fullbacks, and then the aforementioned Cantwell and Buendia.
Obviously, Watford's unique philosophy of getting rid of managers like this nothing has finally come back to bite them. Obviously, they sacked Nigel Pearson with only 2 games to go, even though he had the best record in the Premier League of any of the managers they've had during their time in England's top division. With England, with the Premier League's second oldest squad, he got 7 victories in 20 games, but that clearly wasn't enough as they went down. They've obviously got a decent squad, but do you think getting rid of such an experienced manager like Nigel Pearson going into the Championship will hurt them, Josh?
Yes, realistically. It depends who comes in. Is the current manager permanent?
It's Hayden Mullins, but I think he's just a caretaker.
Say Eddie Howe, if he gets sacked by Bournemouth or leaves Bournemouth, I could see him going to Watford and doing a job there. Devon touched on Norwich having the core of a squad that's already been there for a while, and I think Watford will have that if they keep hold of players like Deeney and Ismaila Sarr, because they've been realistically tearing apart the Premier League. They've scored most of the goals this season for Watford. Sarr's attracted a lot of attention from the big clubs, so if they can hold on to those 2 players for the Championship, I don't think they'll have too much of an issue getting back up the very next season.
I think if they keep someone like Sarr, definitely he's shown a lot of his talent even in the Premier League. Obviously, that standout performance against Liverpool where he put 2 past the champions. So I think I'd agree if they keep someone like Sarr, he has the potential to be a top scorer in the Championship next season. Would you agree, Devon?
Not just Sarr, I think Deeney, apart from what the BBC, Sky Sports, whoever it were, I can't remember who interviewed him. It may only be his last few games for Watford, but I think Deeney will probably stay. He wants to. He's on the wrong side of 30, and he's still got a couple of years, and he's loyal. He's shown his loyalties to Watford anyway. But you've got to think as well. Andre Gray's still there. If he could pick up the form that he showed at Brentford, and he was very prolific for Luton as well, but I know that was League 1 and 2. He could definitely be a key player. I don't think they'll keep hold of Sarr just because of, he's the only resaleable asset really in this squad at the minute. And, but players like Will Hughes, he could prove to be important if they could keep hold of him. But I think one of the 3 promoted sides from the Championship should really be looking at him to poach and bring into their midfield. Maybe Leeds, but I don't know who'd replace in that midfield at the minute. Maybe Tyler Roberts, because I don't think Tyler Roberts is too high quality. But other than that, I think one key player that they've got is Ben Foster, because I think he's too old to go to somewhere else. Go somewhere else, but if they could keep him in, then that's 15 points saved at least from Foster, which he was nearly a key player to keep him up.
Obviously, Josh already mentioned Eddie Howe as a potential replacement for Pearson at Watford, but do you think, Harry, there's any other managers that stick out to you that could become a permanent replacement at Watford?
I think they could take a punt on Danny Cowley. I think he did a really good job at Huddersfield. He guided them to safety. I know he got sacked a few games before they were officially safe, but I think with a budget, with a board that are going to back him and not going to sell all of his best players, I think it's going to be tough for him because it's going to be his biggest job so far. But I think he's got a good chance of doing well if he does go there.
I don't. I think Cowley's rather negative, and Bournemouth have liked to. As I said, be quite expressive and hold on to possession, whereas Cowley's a bit more stern and League 1 based, as we know with Sam's favourite club, Lincoln. I think they'd probably be better off with somebody that's going to play and hold possession football. I can't see. I think Eddie Howe will stay, personally. I think this season's, if not it's tarnished kind of his legacy, if you can call it that. Not just with the Bournemouth fans and the club. I think in terms of his reputation, he was getting linked to Arsenal in the England job. So if he could just stay for Bournemouth and get one more good season out of them, then he might propel himself back onto the the job list. But other than that, I can't off the top of my head, I can't think of really anyone that would suit Bournemouth quite as well as Howe at the minute.
Yeah, many years of torment with Danny Carley at Lincoln for me. Definitely with them doing those FA Cup runs and just being successful. Okay, I think we'll move on to the top four, which obviously concluded as well with the final day. Manchester United recovering a 14-point deficit, which was still there in February to take over Leicester and finish third. With Leicester finish fifth despite being in the top four for 325 days, which with the run that they went on towards the end of the season may have been considered a failure. But at the start of the season, I don't think a lot of them weren't even, they would have been okay with just Europe. So you think with Leicester being in the Europa League, would you still view that as a successful season for Leicester, Josh?
I mean, out of context of where they've spent so much time, yes, as you say at the start of the season, they take that in a heartbeat. But having spent all that time in the Champions League spots, I think they will be disappointed in themselves that they've really just bottled it and dropped out of those places.
Would you agree, Harry?
Yeah, so if you go on Wikipedia and you go Leicester City seasons, it's a step forwards. If you look at them each season, it is a step forwards. But like you said, where they were, they shouldn't be losing it from that point onwards. But it's a good foundation. They've got Europe, so more players are going to want to join due to the fact that they're going to be competing in Europe. And they're sort of a team that I think they can stay in and around that battle. So as long as they once again invest, don't sell a lot of their key players, I think they'll be all right going into next season.
At least we know what Harry's favourite pastime is now.
Looking at Leicester's Wikipedia. So where do you think Leicester need to improve, Devon, to take that next step next season?
Firstly, I think the Manchester United game proved that Wes Morgan is completely past it now. I think even when he was just running with the ball, we've seen it in past seasons where he's actually been quite, for his style and, kind of the old style Championship, hard-hitting centre-half, he has adapted it quite well and played quite well with the ball at his feet. However, that game showed that that when they've not got Sionchu there, the defence is lacking. I'd probably say, because I don't rate Sionchu as highly as a lot of others do. I'm sure he won't see this podcast and be too disheartened anyway. But I think they're probably a centre half away from being a good stable back line, especially if they're going to implement that back three, because Ryan Bennett's just not top five, I don't think. In terms of midfield, I think they're pretty balanced. They could do with one more box-to-box midfielder to complement either Madison or Tielemans, depends who's starting alongside them, and Ndidi. Maybe more cover in that defensive midfield role, because we've seen when they've not got Ndidi, they've kind of crumbled at times. And I think the main focus is going to be a replacement for Vardy, because it's only a matter of time in it really before the goals start to dry up a little bit.
Saying that for years now, though.
Yeah, it's proved us wrong every time, but there will be a point where it does switch. And we've seen parts of this season as well where Vardy's gone 4 or 5 games without scoring, and then eventually he'll come back and he'll hit 5 straight games where he scores, and then he'll have 1 or 2 off. Maybe someone like Danny Ings could replace him quite well.
Oh, that's a great shout, right, Harry?
They can have Yannick Vestergaard. They've been linked with Yannick. They can have him. Just please don't take Danny.
He's not as quick as Vardy though. But I think Danny Ings, that kind of mould of player would benefit Leicester. But I think maybe Ings might be the wrong side of, he's getting on a little bit as well. So we'll see. Where else does other people think that they need to improve on?
Leave him alone.
Oh, main one, wingers. I think they need a high quality winger because Damari Gray is low end Premier League in my opinion. I think Mark Albrighton's had his day, and I think Harvey Barnes though is very promising, and they look more creative when he's on the ball.
Just to switch back to Manchester United for a second, we've obviously talked about their rise in 2020 at length in the podcast, but I'd like to get your take, Josh, on the impact that a player like Bruno Fernandes has had on Manchester United's rise.
Oh, he's been massive, hasn't he? He's come in and he's just banging the goals in for fun. Look at the results they've had since he's come in. They're just obliterating everyone. They look like they're going to score every time they come forward, and I don't think they did before his arrival.
Yeah.
And he's completely changed the face of Manchester United, and I think they could get back to their glory days with him at the helm.
And
So, yeah. Where else do Manchester United need to build then to go back to those glory days, like you say?
I think the defence is a bit weak. I don't rate Harry Maguire. He was ridiculously expensive, but I'm sure everyone's had that conversation before. It's just the defence, and David De Gea. I don't want to say he's past it because he's still one of the better keepers in the Premier League, but he's so prone to error that it costs them time and time again.
Obviously, you're a big Sheffield United man, Devon, with the performances of Dean Henderson this season. Do you think it is time for him to take David De Gea's spot as number one at Old Trafford?
This is the karma for the Cowley comment, isn't it? I think Henderson, given his age, he still makes a few mistakes. I don't think, the one at Liverpool where it popped through his legs, and there's been a few times where he's been beaten at his nearer post. But compare how many points he's won for Sheffield United compared to David De Gea's importance, I think they kind of equal out, and I think Henderson could be the steerhead of Man United's number one problem, which, in the past, we've seen it with when they had to replace Schmeichel, they struggled for a few years, and with Van der Sar, they did find David De Gea, but it took him again a few years to get going. Whereas I think with Henderson, it's kind of a ready-made replacement. It's just a matter of when, because I don't think Manchester United are going to let De Gea go for cheap, and I don't think they're going to force him out as much. It just depends whether Henderson's temperament of waiting on the sidelines is going to last, because there will be a point where he's going, actually, and I think it was this summer, I think especially in the lockdown period, he's going, no, I want to be Manchester United number one, or I'm going. And it just depends how the pressure of that of his words lie fit with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Does he go down the promising route, or does he go for the tried and tested?
It might be good to have Henderson there waiting in the sidelines next season for De Gea to put a bit more pressure on him. Obviously, Chris Wilder said that they would obviously take him back. Dean Henderson, they would obviously take him back for another year if they could. But maybe for De Gea, it would be better for Henderson to stay and put that necessary pressure on him to up his performances again. Because he's still clearly got the quality as a shot stopper.
I think we've kind of seen a little bit of a tip off in terms of Sheffield United have been linked with their former goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale from Bournemouth this week, and maybe they are preparing for life after Dean Henderson. But I don't think Sheffield United would go unnecessarily go and spend 15 million on a player if they were going to get Henderson back on loan. I think Ramsdale's been important for Bournemouth, but I don't think anyone would turn down Dean Henderson.
Okay, moving on to Chelsea. They obviously secured fourth spot and a return to the Champions League with a 2-0 win over Wolves, their sixth successive home game, which they have won. Obviously, Lampard came in at the start of the season with the transfer ban hanging over Chelsea's head, but he's done a fine job, obviously, with an FA Cup final coming up as well. So, Harry, do you think Lampard has exceeded expectations this season?
Oh, most certainly. I think he's one of the first ever Chelsea managers, if any, in the previous 15, 20 years that hasn't had a transfer window where he can ship out all the deadwood he wants and bring in his own players. Yes, he did have Pulisic, but A, that wasn't his transfer, and B, no one knew how good he was going to be. He didn't have Hazard, which is a big reason why Sarri got as high as he did. And he had to implement the youth that previously only really had championship experience, and he's guided them to a top four place, despite their defensive frailties, especially. I think next season, when he's going to be able to invest in the squad, maybe not win the Premier League, but I think he could be quite close, top four at least.
And he has already invested heavily, obviously in an attacking sense of Hakim Ziyech and Timo Werner coming in. Where do you see them finishing next season, Josh?
Challenging for the title. I do. I think they're already clearly very good. I mean, they've got to a cup final, which is coming up soon, and they finished top four, and Werner and Ziyech will only make them better. I think it's important, and it's very good what they have already with such a young squad who can grow together. And Ziyech and Werner aren't too old themselves, so they can grow together and mould into a well-beating side, I think.
Obviously, Olivier Giroud, at the age of 33, became the oldest player to score five consecutive Premier League starts, which is, he has a lot of critics, but that's pretty impressive. Obviously, with the FA Cup coming up, like we've mentioned, against his former side, could we see him lead the line for Chelsea, Devon?
Yeah, I think Tammy Abraham's kind of really boiled off in terms of his form that he showed early on in the season. And Giroud, not Dahoud. I'm still thinking we're on the De Classica preview. No, Giroud's still at his age. He's like a fine wine, isn't he? He's still very important to this Chelsea setup, and he's still scoring. And if anyone wants to haunt his former side, it's definitely going to be Giroud rather than David Luiz, as a lot of betting companies have been advertising that battle.
You mentioned Tammy Abraham there. Where does his future lie? Does he have a future at Chelsea?
Most definitely. I think he's definitely one for the future. You've got to remember this is only the second season really he's been in the Premier League, and his first one was just a bit part role in Swansea's demise, and he were in a very poor squad, in my opinion. Whereas this year he's definitely shown flashes of what he could be. He just needs to learn that, to be more consistent, make the right runs, get in the right areas. And I think it's been a little bit unlucky in after lockdown that he scored just before we all went into this crisis, and then just after it, he's been nearly there. He just needs to fine tune and probably get more match sharpness, which in turn has given Giroud pretty much all the chances. But I think it's now Tammy's time to show whether he wants to be part of this Chelsea squad or not. We've said Timo Werner's come in, he can play down the middle or on the wing, and there's also the impending transfer of Kai Havertz as well, which means that it's going to be more battle, which can only improve Tammy Abraham if he's willing to do that. Just depends what his temperament's like, because we've seen in Bristol City and at Aston Villa, he can be a potent forward for any side.
Obviously, they come up against Arsenal in the FA Cup final, who are obviously the most successful side in the trophy's history. Mikel Arteta has had some time now to imprint his coaching style, but it was still Arsenal's worst league finish for 25 years. So, where do Arsenal need to target Chelsea? What is the key to success for Arsenal to secure their 13th FA Cup, Harry?
Just play all of your attacking players. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you start with Aubameyang, Lacazette and Pepe, Chelsea's defence won't be able to handle it. You've seen this season, they've not been able to. Kepa's conceded, 11 goals more than XG's expected or something ridiculous like that. Just keep peppering them. I know Willy Caballero will probably play, so that won't be quite the same issue. But their main issue has been defending. So if you just keep pressuring them, it sounds obvious, but a lot of times obvious works. And if that happens, they're very, very good players. You've seen the impact Aubameyang has when he's in the team and the impact it has on Arsenal when he's not in there. Just play the most potent players and they'll probably get a good result.
Does an FA Cup title potentially keep players like Aubameyang at Arsenal for at least one more season, Josh?
Yeah, I think it would. You know, that taste of success, which they're longing for, really. Aubameyang, he's good enough to be winning trophies, and he just won't be at Arsenal unless they win the cup.
So where do Arsenal go forward from that FA Cup as well? Where do they improve for next season, Devon?
I think they've got a lot of improvements to do. I think the defence is the main issue because they are terrible at the back. It's fair to say. Maybe the influence of is it Saliba will bring a bit more sturdiness there, but I think they need to make that transition from the old centre half, so Mustafi, Socrates, and David Luiz, and bring a bit more, a more youthful look. I don't think Callum Chambers is good enough, and I think Rob Holding's still a bit part player because I think he's on the borderline between mid-table, Premier League, and lower end. In terms of elsewhere, I think they're lacking a brilliant holding midfielder, someone like Vieira. We mentioned many a time before that they need someone like William Carvalho and Thomas Partey as well. Somebody that's going to break up play, but then actually be effective on the ball, maybe drive forward like Vieira did. Other than that, I think maybe a new number 9 because the system with Aubameyang on the left works, but it just depends whether one they're going to get rid of Lacazette because the rumours have seemed to have intensified over the last few weeks. It's kind of been either Lacazette or Aubameyang, which I think Arsenal fans would love both to stay, but if anyone is going to go, I think they'd prefer Lacazette too. And Eddie Nketiah is just not prolific enough to keep Arsenal challenging where they want to be.
Obviously, they need a lot more signings, as you say, but the appointment of Mikel Arteta has been a refreshing one, and his turn to the 3-5-2 formation has worked pretty well. Where do you think that Arteta has improved this side the most already?
I think it's just a bit of a belief and a bit of temperament. Under Emery and Lundberg, they were quite rash and prone to mistakes, whereas I think Arteta, under the guidance of Pep Guardiola's, made them more not like a schoolboy look, but they have it drilled into consistency and level-headedness. Kind of a bit like Pearson, but with a bit more pizzazz, so to speak. I think what an important signing would be maybe trying to get Danny Caballero back as well, because that's not his name, is it?
Ceballos.
Yes, it's a mix of a goalkeeper as well. No, but Ceballos.
Get them both.
Ceballos has been very good. I think surprisingly, Leno's injuries kind of helped Arsenal because Martinez has really proved himself as a number 1 goalkeeper and
That's been decent.
made some important saves as well. So that kind of his willingness to lose the weight that he was told to and improve on his technical skills has benefited Arsenal.
Okay, moving on to our final segment before the quiz. We're going to discuss some transfer stories that have come up most recently. And my pick is one which is fresh news this morning, Nathan Ake, a £41 million bid accepted by Bournemouth from Manchester City for the young Dutch defender. So if this move does come to fruition, does this solve Manchester City's defensive problems? That's open to anyone.
Yeah, I had it written down as mine, but we'll
go
with
it. I expect someone else to have that as well, to be fair.
Yeah, it's definitely a good deal. I think for somebody of his, 25 going into his peak, and being, he's proved to be a very good defender in a poor side, and he is somebody that's had the experience of a big club in Chelsea. not necessarily played many games for them, but he's definitely knows how to act in that kind of regime. And I think it's a good deal in terms of Bournemouth getting the necessary funds, as we've already mentioned, which we won't dwell too much on. Manchester City need a defender. There's no doubt about that. John Stones is just not good enough. Well, seemingly not good enough for Manchester City. I think maybe elsewhere in a good side it'd be decent. Maybe Everton would take him back.
He's been linked with Chelsea.
Yeah.
Could he go there?
I think Chelsea need to look more for a leader rather than John Stones. I think John Stones is still more of a second centre half, but they probably Koulibaly would be better for Chelsea, someone like that. But to go back, John Stones, I don't think is good enough in Manchester City's system, and I think Otamendi's completely past it now. We've seen many a time when Fernandinho has dropped into centre half. That's where Rodri's let a lot more shots on goal from outside the box, and that's what's led to Manchester City being targeted more from long range and also conceding a lot more. So I think Ake coming in will definitely solidify their back two, and maybe he might even, I know he's not just because he's kind of moulds as a player, but they need somebody like Vincent Kompany to really take this Manchester City side to that next level defensively, because attackingly they're exceptional. Yeah, it's just that back line that we've been talking about for years, that's not good enough.
Kompany's probably been the biggest absentee for City this season. That leadership that they've craved. So, seeing as Devon also picked Ake, I'll go to Harry for his bit of transfer news.
See, mine is more sort of general. No one's put a bid in yet, but Zaha's been said that he can go for 40 million. I was just wondering, where do you guys think that he will move on? Because pretty sure he will go. He will go despite his long-term contract with the club. 40 million. Who's going to buy us at that price?
I think Everton have been the main team linked with him, apart from Arsenal. Maybe he'd be a good fit for Leicester when we talked about that winger that they need. Is definitely an improvement on the likes of Gray and Albrighton. I think it's just it's a matter of attitude. With Zaha, if Jordan Ayew didn't really pick up the reins that Zaha left, then we might have seen Palace drop off massively. I'm not saying Zaha's not been there all season. I think he's been good, but he's not been exceptional from what we saw 2-3 seasons ago.
I think the rumours and all the speculation has hurt Zaha a bit. Obviously had a bit of a public spat with the hierarchy at Crystal Palace. And this season he's fallen off a little bit, but obviously, Josh, you're an Everton fan. Would you take him at Everton?
I would, yeah. I mean, Everton are clearly in the market for a winger, and we came so close to signing him, allegedly, last window. And I think that's where one of the issues lay for Carlo Ancelotti and Everton is down the wing, because on the right, Alex Iwobi, he's doing a good job. He got a lot of stick when the move was made, but last few weeks he's been a different class for Everton, really. He's been very creative. But on the left, there's no one. And so Gylfi Sigurdsson has been playing down the flank and utilising the overlapping runs of Lucas Digne, which in turn has left Everton very open at the back. I know Digne is like quite an attacking player and he's a very good fullback, and I wouldn't ever say that he isn't, but with him being so instrumental to the attack, there's always that gap for the other team to exploit, and it happened against Bournemouth, and it happens week in, week out at the moment. So I think another winger is definitely needed.
Josh, I know you've got your own suggestion as a winger for Everton in a second, but do you think Zaha's perspective of looking at somebody who has previously moved from a Premier League side to another Premier League side for quite a lot of money in Richarlison, and seeing how he's flourished under, well, not just under Ancelotti, but even at Silva, he got Everton out of a few rows. Do you think that'll encourage him to pick Everton?
Yeah, I think it will. It's it's been done. Everton are known to have good backroom staff and good facilities, and they always are very good at training up youngsters. And I think just the appeal of playing under Carlo Ancelotti would be enough, really. That might sound a bit ridiculous, but he's a legend of the game, really. It's a blessing to have him managing. And I think
3
someone like
Champions
Zaha,
Leagues.
well, yeah, too right. And now he's got Jared Branthwaite as centre back. But I think Zaha could flourish under a management like that.
From
Roy Hodgson.
Maldini to
Bruyne.
Everton, basically.
Yeah, from Maldini to Luke Garbutt, who we forgot.
All right then, go on, Josh. Your pick for the transfer.
Incidentally, that brings me onto a winger linked to Everton, and that is Jeremy Boga. And he's been playing for Sassuolo in Serie A recently. He's a 23-year-old Ivorian. Previous experience in England playing with Chelsea, although he made just one appearance, and Birmingham in 2018, I believe it was, on loan. And it's just a link at the moment, nothing official as far as I'm aware. But it's stiff competition from Napoli, Borussia Dortmund, and Bayer Leverkusen. So he's clearly hot property. He scored 11 in his 34 appearances for Sassuolo this season in the league, and the fee for him is expected to be around 35 million.
I think
bargain these days.
Don't Chelsea also have a buyback clause on that deal as well?
They did, but recently it was they agreed a deal to cancel that. The buyback would have been, I believe, between 14 and 18 million, so that sort of ballpark. But deals have been agreed that a buyback clause will be cancelled, and so there is not a buyback clause anymore.
Yeah, I think they need strengthening both on the wings because Bernard hasn't been good enough. Theo Walcott, no one expects him to have a big influence, but he's not quite had the impact. If they can get a winger and if they can get a solid central midfielder as well, maybe when Gbamin comes back, he might be that man. I think they could really push on 12th. Everton fans and Carlo Ancelotti would certainly be disappointed with that. But I think top 10, if they can strengthen in the right areas and bring in some goal influence in that winged area, because up front they're good enough already with Richarlison, who sometimes plays off the left, I know, and Calvert-Lewin, who both have a lot of goals between them. Get 2 new wingers in, or at least just one, and you're good. You're good for next season.
I think that middle pack that's sort of formed in the Premier League this season, I think it's very tight. So just the margins are so fine. So 1 or 2 additions to spice Everton up, and they could definitely be in the European hunt next season, I think.
I think Everton's problems being because they've had this big pot of money, they've been kind of like a child in a sweet shop, and they've been like, oh, we'll buy him, and it's been quite excessive in terms of transfer fees. They just need Carlo, they need that somebody. I'm not going to bring out the impression, but. They need probably somebody upstairs to kind of forge a plan and a kind of sustainable, because maybe one day we know how like water and like water on paper, how wet the FFP rulings are in the last few weeks.
I was wondering where you're going to go with that. I'm not going to lie.
Where's he going with this?
But Everton needs to just really become more sustainable in terms of and more intelligent with the spending, in my opinion.
Okay, I think it's time. Obviously, Josh has replaced George on the discussion. To replace George this week as the quiz master, which has allowed us to continue our quiz series, of course, which is, I think we're on the back straight now, definitely. And obviously, yours truly is at the top.
Yes, the scores after 20 rounds from George is Sam is leading with 57 points. Harry is on 55, and Devon's on 51. But
anything can happen.
Last week I gained quite a bit of ground, so let's see what Josh has in store for the quiz.
Well. With it just round the corner, we have 5 points available, 5 questions on the Championship Player Final.
Oh no,
Yes.
This is
Devon's
right
very
up Devon
good.
Street.
Devon's
I
special.
expect big things from Mr. Devon Cash. So, are we ready for the first question?
That's our level.
Ready.
The pressure's on now.
Which club has won it the most times? Is it A, Aston Villa, B, QPR, or C, Crystal Palace?
Ooh.
Mm.
You can feel the intensity. It's suddenly gone up a level. Now we know there's only 2 or 3 weeks left of the quiz.
Yeah,
Ooh.
we're certainly on the back straight.
I'm not sure. We'll go with that one there. That was done.
Has everyone got an answer?
I do.
Oh,
Devon looks like he's still pondering.
the
I'm
playoff
trying to
boffin
work
is
it
struggling.
out. I'm trying to work it out. It was between 2, and I've just guessed. So.
Are you ready to go?
Yep.
Right, second question then. In 2014, Bobby Zamora scored a late winner for QPR. A year later, he was knocked out in the semis with which club? Was it A, Brighton and Hove Albion, B, Derby County, or C, Reading?
Ooh. I'll go with.
I saw that.
That was no.
Is that thumbs up compliance or?
That was a thumbs up. Devon looks really distressed.
I feel happy because I think I know.
Right, everyone got their answers?
Yeah.
I do indeed.
The 1998 final between Charlton Athletic and Sunderland holds the record for the most goals. But what was the score after extra time? Was it A, 3-2, B, 6-3, or C, 4-4?
Hmm. Baby. The silence. So tense.
Do we have our answers? Or
we need some music.
Yeah, we need tension music back. We're gonna have to get someone playing in house next year.
shall we move on to question 4?
We shall.
Question 4. The Championship playoff final. There is no single sporting event in the world more valuable to the winners, but just how much better off are they than the team that lose? Is it A, £100 million, B, £170 million, or C, £240 million?
See, I thought it was.
D, a lot.
Yeah. Damn, he got me.
It's the most expensive game in football, isn't it? I think. Don't quote me on it, but
yeah,
I think it is.
What was the options again? Sorry.
A, 100 million, B, 170 million, or C, 240 million?
I know what our total were against Hull, and I don't think we got that much from it. So,
because you lost.
right, that's it.
Being attacked.
We are replacing Sam with Gooders for the foreseeable, and Joe will slot back in.
Are we ready for question 5?
We're now on a high.
Whoever wins the podcast, the podcast quiz leaves.
Right.
I'm going to do that Xabi Alonso photo with the boots.
Walking away from Willows.
Sorry, Josh. Go on.
Question 5. There's 6 correct answers. I want you to name one, but I'll allow 2 guesses. So you can choose 2 teams. There's 1 point available, and there's 6 correct answers. And the question is, the playoff winners have finished above the champions and the runners-up in the subsequent Premier League season 7 times. Can you name any club who has done this?
Oh dear.
Wait, sorry.
Just repeat
Can you
the
repeat
question
that again?
again?
I do apologise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The playoff winners have finished above the champions and the runners-up of the championship in the subsequent Premier League season 7 times. Can you name any club who has done this? I'll give you 2 guesses. There's 1 point available and there's 6 correct answers. So someone's won it twice.
Good question.
Done it twice,
Hell,
sorry. No.
hell of a memory jogger, this one.
Did. No.
My brain's just completely gone here. I'm not going to lie. My brain is completely gone.
I'll give you some time.
We will go with. I don't know. So.
El Punto.
Trying to think. So it's. So, no.
Oh God.
Could be.
Need to put the pressure on. I'll pretend I know.
Could be that one actually.
Name, don't put all 7 down.
Could be them.
And the years.
We'll go with them.
And the goal scorers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have we all got answers?
Yeah.
I do.
Right, so we'll go back to the question 1 answers. Devon, what have you put for question 1?
I've gone for Crystal Palace.
Sam
I also went to Palace.
Darn
and
it.
Harry.
I put QPR. You probably can't see it. QPR. There we are.
Yeah.
QPR.
The answer is C, Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
Darn it. That was the other one.
I
They've
think.
won 4 times in 5 appearances.
Goodness sake.
I was gonna say because Villa have only come down from the Premier League once, so there's only one for them. And
Yeah.
QPR, I think, have only done it once. They've had
One
2
with-
promotions and 1 through playoffs, I think.
One with Mr. Holloway.
That's annoying.
So question 2, Bobby Zamora question. Devon, answer please.
I believe it's Brighton when Sheffield Wednesday beat them.
Sam Allen.
I can only remember him playing for Brighton, so that's who I went for. Out of the
And
options.
Harry.
Yeah, either all of us or none of us get it because I also put Bryson.
Points across the board. It is indeed Brighton and Hove Albion.
Yeah.
So I remember his I'm back video. I don't know if that was from that one, but I remember that video. So I was hoping it was from that. Oh dear.
Question 3 then, the 1998 final, which saw quite a lot of goals. And what was the score after extra time, Devon?
Is it 4-4?
Sam?
Matching Devon all the way here, 4-4.
Yeah, once again,
Harry.
so that all of us
No.
or none of us.
It's a stalemate.
Because I also put 4-4. I should have put
I've made this
4-4.
too easy.
Entertaining this.
Points across the board, 4-4. Charlton
love to
won
see.
7-6 on penalties and were promoted to the Premier
What a
League.
game.
Oh, this is not going to be a change, is it?
we can't separate you.
Numero quattro.
Did you also say Palace? Harry.
No, I didn't know. I said
Oh,
QPR.
so
QPR.
Sam.
I wasn't too sure of that one.
Extended my
Question 4. So, just how much money do the winners make? How much more do the winners make than the losers, Devon?
I believe it is from what we before. I remember I was 180, so I'm going to say 170.
Sam
I went 240.
Oh,
and Harry.
I went 170. There we are, 170.
It's B. It's 170 million.
Yeah.
Come on.
All gate receipts go to the loser to soften the blow of missing
Ooh.
out.
Ah,
That's
Well, we haven't seen any of
lovely,
that.
which is lovely.
What's
Like
that?
David
Commiserations.
Jones after it and George Boyd. What's this?
Okay, you get a commiserations card as well.
Sorry, we smashed you.
Merc.
Right. Right. The final question then. The 6 teams that have done better than those who finished above them in the championship in the subsequent season. 2 guesses each. Devon, give me your 2 teams.
The 2 ones
I've only
I've
got
gone
one.
for are Watford and Norwich.
Sam
West Ham, Watford.
and Harry.
I put QPR and West Ham.
Thinking about it, I don't think Watford went up in playoffs.
That's points for Sam and Harry with West
Yes.
Ham.
Oh, yeah.
Who did it twice. West
Do you know
Ham, the
what
only team to
season
have done
it
it
was?
twice.
Do you know what season it was for West Ham? If not, no worries.
I didn't write it down.
That's fine.
Probably when
That's fine.
Vaz Tate got the win.
that's what I was
Blackpool.
thinking. That's what I was thinking.
They're
as
still
well.
in the league
one
now,
was
so.
fairly recent. Yeah.
Because when we got promoted, I think they finished above us the next season.
Right. Do you want me to
The
tell
other teams,
total everything up?
the other teams you could have had, just
You got the
quickly,
scores.
the other teams you could have had were Blackburn Rovers, Leicester City, Ipswich Town, West Ham United, as you 2 got, Swansea City, and Crystal Palace.
Oh,
Right.
Oh, crossed out Palace.
Harry, how many did you get right?
I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I only missed out on the first question.
Did we all get 4?
I got 4, yeah.
We all got 4.
Stalemate.
So that's a stalemate. At least I'm not further behind. I'll take that at the end of that.
Right.
I'll take that.
So everyone at the edge of the seats and nothing's changed apart from a score number. In last place is yours truly with 55 points.
Yeah.
Second place is still Harry with 59. And Sam is in first with 61.
I'm insane.
What way to
And
end?
I'm not sure when the final episode is going to be for all you fans out there.
On top.
But
Yeah.
it's looking like it's coming down to the last 2 or 3 podcast episodes, so it's going to get interesting in this quiz so far soon anyway.
Okay, that does it for this week. Thank you to Josh Goodman.
Thank you very much for having me, boys. Absolute
being
pleasure
on.
as always.
No worries. So, yeah, that's about it. Follow us on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And we will see you next week with another episode. Bye.
See you later.